harmonized 19th century. And then in the new contemporary way, and I make it as gentle as I can. Somewhat different from the beginning. Now, the beginning of written music in Greece started with what we are apt to misunderstand, the cheironomy of the conductors. Chair in Greek means the hand, nomos, the law, the custom, the habit. We have a few distinguished conductors who have thrown away the baton and conduct just with their hands and fingers. It looks very personal and not an exciting. We have seen one very distinguished one beginning a piece in the following way, and I sometimes thought maybe that finger was the cue for the fourth oboe. But anyway, the art of conducting with hands and fingers in Greece was the right way of communicating with the singers. And what did they write? They had what we call neumes. Pneuma in Greek is a breathing, an accent. And the neumes, as we know them, I can demonstrate a few of them on the keyboard, on the blackboard. In fact, they are right there. The rise, the fall, the curve, the dot, the hold, and the double accent and the sharp accent, and there are many more signs. So this was the language which expressed the music. The neumes were for those who had learned the melody by ear, and the neumes were there to refresh their memory. Later on, they had to be written above and below one line, and the evolution came rather quickly. 1 line, 2 lines, 3 lines, 4 lines, and 4 lines lasted some 100 years. Then the staff began to grow. And we know it even reached 11 lines until somebody had the bright idea of saying, how can we possibly go on? I want to go back to the blackboard and let you see. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 5 more. That was rather disturbing for anyone except those who were really devoted to reading correctly. Then one bright man said, I have the answer to this. He rubbed out the middle one, and thus our staff was created. The treble, and the bass, and in the middle C. This way is demonstrated how our system developed. One-voiced in Greece and one-voiced in the time of Bishop of Rome, Ambrose. He died in 397 Anno Domini. They sang those songs. During the regime of Pope Gregory, who died in 604 Anno Domini, there was a solo singer and the chorus repeated. And the chorus, that was already a symphonic attitude. The solo singer and the chorus repeating. Then came the moment where some bright monk said, it sounds awfully monotonous, just that one note. From now on, I'm going to sing a fifth lower. And another day he said, I'm going to sing a fourth lower. This is the beginning of two-voiced singing. This was in parallel motion. And another bright monk said, well, I'm going to sing contrary motion to the melody. Therefore he sang, certainly music began to be more interesting. But then it needed another bright monk who thought, sounds rather empty to me. There must be something between. And he found, oh, all the young ones said, how beautiful, how modern. And the old ones said, no, there is no beauty in this. And they fortunately passed out. Then through the 100 of years, they added the 7th, the 9th, the 11th, the 13th, and finally all the notes of the scale were in the chord. Even had Dr. Brahms, the very conservative but wonderful master of music, he, in one of his last piano pieces, has the chord of the 13th. And then they begin writing 3, 4, 5 voiced, and Richard Strauss had a great vocal composition, 16 voices against each other. The end of the polyphonic or Baroque era is the end of Bach's influence upon music. Johann Sebastian naturally has written marvelous fugues in 3, 4, and 5 voices. I might indicate a little one in C minor, 3 voices. Short example of 4-voiced. Johann Sebastian did not leave any disciples or pupils. And as it is well known, his music was silent for over 70 years. He himself was so modest about his art that he did not think that his music would survive. Then comes a new era, the era of simple melody, of which my neighbor here, Herr Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, is the great exponent. He played, like so many others, the celebrated Alberti bass. There was an Italian, Domenico Alberti, who lived in Venice, who no doubt was the inventor of this simple means of accompanying a melody. Mozart Sonata. That is, you can hear the melody without being interfered with by other voices. So Mozart and many others, for instance, his great friend Stamitz, who was the conductor in Mannheim, they were absolutely sure that they had found the continuation of music. I might say a word about the range of the instrument. Bach had only 4 octaves. And within those 4 octaves, he wrote these marvelous gems of preludes and fugues and many other pieces. Mozart had about 5 or 6 octaves. And naturally, that always affected the writing of music for the range. Now, on our new pianos, we have 7 octaves and 4 keys. And the manufacturers of instruments would like to make them even more elongated on each side, but our arms are not getting any longer. And we can't have swivel chairs or moving out from where we sit. In a few weeks, I shall speak to you of the history of the piano, where we can tell you how the piano grew from the little dulcimer, which was about that size, which they took under the arm, went to visit the neighbors, and said, let us have a little music. You can't do that with the grand pianos, the concert grands. From the dulcimer, we shall go through the clavichord, harpsichord, the Cristofori piano to the present concert grand, and then the vain efforts of mechanical and electronic people to improve upon this keyboard. As long as we can sing on the piano of today, the piano will be the same. Naturally, another approach to evolution can be the tonal one. The simple chorale or the polytonal, which means poly, many, tones against each other. Once upon a time, I wrote a little piece which was called Argument, the black keys against the white keys. That's an argument. Nobody wins. Then the atonal of Schoenberg, which eliminated key centers of tones. And that brings me to a charming little story. Oscar Levant had just finished his own piano concerto in a concert of the Philadelphia Symphony. He had played the Rhapsody in Blue of Gershwin and earned a tremendous ovation. Then he played his own concerto, which fell flat with the audience. Seemingly even Philadelphia was not ready for it. And at the party after the concert, the hostess, knowing my attitude towards people who are not exactly successful, asked me to sit at the same table with him and he sat across from me, and on each side the socialite. They confessed immediately they didn't know much about music, and the one asked me, "What kind of music is this?" I could have said, "If any." But what kind of music is this? And I said, "Will you ask Mr. Levant?" And so she said, "No, I don't dare." Then Levant heard what we said, and he said, "I'm a pupil of Schoenberg. I studied with Schoenberg, and my music is atonal." And the socialite turned to me again and said, "What is that?" And I said, "Maybe you can understand much better if I say it is free for all. Anything can be done, anything can happen." And she was perfectly satisfied. Now, there can be rhythmical ideas. That's a purely rhythmical idea. There can be a polyrhythmical idea, two rhythms against each other. And in the Algerian suite of Saint-Saëns, 6/8 against 3/4. Now we come to an expression which is called the clusters. In my little Sphinx you heard the tiny innocent one. That's a cluster of 3 notes. A man, Alkan, wrote a cluster of 5 notes. Then Mr. Bartók has clusters. And finally, Mr. Henry Cowell invented the playing with the arm. And a little piece of his called The Holy Mountain of Japan. That may be modern, but it is old-fashioned, because Darieux, the French composer in the 17th century, wrote what he called cannon shots. And he had a piece called Charge the Enemy. And he said, take the flat hand and beat the harpsichord as hard as you can. So clusters of yore and clusters of today, it doesn't make any difference. We are used to anything. The question is only, does music go on in the right direction? After all, there are only 4 elements of music, and I might make the drawing at the blackboard. First, anywhere is the song. And anywhere where there are living beings, there is rhythm or the dance. And then came harmony, to hold them together. Harmony, melody, rhythm. And finally, what they used to call tone quality, came color. Color. And we owe the expression of real color in music to the Impressionists, Debussy and Ravel. The evolution of music goes through many eras. There is the medieval, the troubadours with their little songs. The 16th century counterpoint, Palestrina, the pre-Bach, the Baroque, the early and late classics, represented mostly by Beethoven, who seemingly was the end of the classical period and the beginning of the Romantic. Then the post-Wagnerian, also the classical romantics, the German Brahms and the Frenchman César Franck. Then comes the Impressionism of Debussy and Ravel, the realism, neoclassicism of Stravinsky, the Expressionism of Schoenberg, and then contemporary music. What a nice word. It looks innocent. All of the masters of music were contemporary once upon a time. Most of the great ones were radicals, pathfinders. They were modern. And the word modern is a fleeting expression. In the year 1581, Vincenzo Galilei wrote about musica antica e moderna. And Nicola Vincentino in 1551 spoke of alla moderna musica pratica. A few examples demonstrate that at the keyboard how music advanced. There is that beautiful E major chord of Beethoven in the Opus 109 sonata. The first beautiful pedaled chord of E major. Then comes Chopin and adds F sharp, there comes Debussy, adds the C sharp, Monsieur Ravel adds the D sharp, and Scriabin adds more and more. Scriabin brought the major and minor chord together. If you like the major more, play it this way. If you like the minor chord, play it this way. But here they are together for the first time. Then comes the marriage of keys, F sharp major and C major in Ravel. Yet they are closely related. Or finally, in the fireworks of Debussy, after the big bouquet of fireworks, I always explained the people are going home in the key of D flat, but the soldier who plays the Marseillaise in the barracks, he doesn't know that. So he plays in C major, but they have been going awfully well together. And the last one that I would illustrate is in Vienna, when I met young Korngold, whose sonata I had played frequently. I said to him, why don't you write some Viennese waltzes? And he did this. He said, Mr. Ganz, look here, the early Viennese waltzes of Lanner were simple. Then came Johann Strauss. Then came Waldteufel. There's nothing left for me. This is the evolution of the Viennese waltz. And naturally, we can go on. I expect to devote one of the visits with RG to modern contemporary music, to dissonance, to the hostile attitude of critics, of professional musicians, and also of composers towards everything that is new. It will be interesting, I think.
This has been A Visit with Rudolph Ganz, brought to you by Chicago Musical College of Roosevelt University. Next week, Mr. Ganz will tell us about the golden era of opera in Chicago.
Regarding the music of the future,